Welcome back to Lantern Lake Stories. Tonight, find somewhere comfortable, let the weight of the day fall away, and settle in close to the lantern light. Because tonight's story begins on a September evening when the air smelled like rain and wood smoke, and a man named Thomas Gray returned to the town he swore he'd never see again. He came back for a funeral, but what he found waiting for him beside the water wasn't grief. It was a letter written 20 years ago, a promise he'd forgotten, and a second chance he didn't know he deserved. This is the story of what happened when he opened that letter. The town of Willowshore sits in the kind of valley most people only see on postcards. It's tucked between rolling Pennsylvania hills, where autumn comes early and stays long, painting the maples gold and crimson before the first frost ever touches the ground. There's a main street with brick sidewalks, a diner that's been run by the same family since 1952, and a lake so still on windless evenings that it looks like a sheet of hammered silver. The lake is called Ember Lake, though no one remembers why. Thomas Gray hadn't seen it in 2 decades. He sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, hands still gripping the wheel, staring at the wooden sign that marked the town limits. The sign reads, Willowshore, population 1,847. Founded 1883. Someone had strung a garland of fading sunflowers across the top of the sign. That was new. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe things like that had always been here, and he just stopped noticing before he left. Thomas exhaled slowly and turned off the engine. The funeral was tomorrow. He'd driven 4 hours to get here, and he had maybe 12 more before he'd stand in the United Methodist Church on Hickory Street and watch them lower Catherine Albright into the ground. Miss Albright, his 10th grade English teacher. The woman who had believed in him when no one else had, who'd told him he had a gift with words, who'd written him a letter of recommendation that got him in a Penn State even though his grades were middling at best. She had died 3 days ago at 81 in her sleep. And according to her lawyer, she had left something for Thomas in her will. He didn't know what it was. The lawyer had been vague on the phone, saying only that Miss Albright had wanted him to have it, and that he'd need to come to Willowshore in person to collect it. So here he was. Thomas stepped out of the car and stretched, his back stiff from the drive. The evening was cool but not cold, and the crickets were singing their slow, rhythmic chorus in the grass along the roadside. Above him, the first stars were starting to prick through the deepening twilight. He pulled his jacket from the back seat and locked the car, then stood there for a moment, looking down the road toward town. It all looked smaller than he remembered. The houses along Maple Avenue were the same. The Hendersons' place with a wraparound porch. The Kowalskis' blue cottage with the white shutters. Old Mr. Werner's workshop, where he used to repair clocks and watches, though Thomas had heard he'd passed away years ago. Everything was familiar. Everything was strange. He started walking. The sound of his footsteps on the gravel shoulder seemed too loud in the quiet. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A porch light flickered on at the corner of Maple and Birch. Through a lit window, he saw the silhouette of someone moving in a kitchen, and for a moment, he wondered if it was someone he used to know. Probably. In a town like Willowshore, everyone knew everyone, which meant that by now, they probably all knew he was back. Thomas had booked a room at the Willowshore Inn, the only bed and breakfast in town. It was a tall, narrow Victorian house painted pale yellow, with dark green trim and a porch that sagged just slightly on the left side. A wrought iron lantern hung beside the front door, glowing softly in the dusk. The owner was a woman named Patty Crane. She'd been running the inn for as long as Thomas could remember, and when he stepped into the front hallway with its floral wallpaper and creaking floorboards, she looked up from the reception desk and smiled like no time had passed at all. "Look at you." He offered a small smile. "Oh, stop it with the Mrs. Crane. You're not 16 anymore. It's Patty." She came around the desk, wiping her hands on her apron and looked him up and down with the kind of affectionate scrutiny only small-town landladies can manage. "You look good. Tired but good. Long drive." "You bet." She reached for a key hanging on a wooden board behind her. "I've got you in the blue room upstairs. Quiet. Overlooks the backyard." "Thank you." I was real sorry to hear about Catherine. She was a good woman. She was. "You here for the service tomorrow?" He nodded. She studied him for a moment, then patted his arm gently. "Well, you let me know if you need anything. I've got fresh coffee on in the mornings, and I can make you breakfast if you'd like." "That'd be great." "Good. It's nice to have you back, Thomas, even if it's just for a little while." He wasn't sure what to say to that, so he just nodded and headed for the stairs. The blue room was exactly as advertised. Pale blue walls, white linens, a single window that looked out over a small garden and the dark line of trees beyond. The bed was old but sturdy, and the room smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. It was quiet, too quiet. In Philadelphia, there was always noise. Traffic, sirens, voices. The hum of the city was constant, a kind of white noise he'd learned to tune out. But here, the silence felt heavy. He rubbed his face and glanced at his phone. No new messages. He told his boss he'd be gone for 2 days, maybe 3. He told his girlfriend, Lauren, the same thing. She'd been understanding in the distant, polite way she always was when he talked about his past. She didn't like talking about the past. She preferred things simple, present tense. Thomas wasn't sure if that was why their relationship felt so hollow lately, or if the hollowness had always been there and he was only just now noticing it. Beyond the garden, past the line of trees, he could just make out the faint shimmer of Ember Lake in the distance. He hadn't been down to the water in 20 years. Not since the night he left. The road curved gently downhill, lined with old oaks and the occasional street lamp. Most of the houses were dark. A few had porch lights on, glowing soft and yellow against the night. The sound of the lake came first. A faint lapping of water against the shore, rhythmic and low. Then the smell, clean and faintly mineral, with a hint of wet earth and decaying leaves. And then he saw it. He'd been 17 the last time he stood here. It was late August, the summer before his senior year, and the air had been thick with humidity and the sound of cicadas. He'd come down to the lake with a girl named Anna Delacroix, and they'd sat on the dock with their feet dangling over the water, talking about everything and nothing. Anna had been his best friend since middle school. She wanted to be a painter. She wanted to travel. He'd tell her he was leaving. He was going to study journalism, maybe become a writer, maybe make something of himself. And he wasn't coming back. Anna had smiled, but her eyes had been sad. "You'll forget all about this place," she'd said softly. "No, I won't." "You will. And that's okay. You should. What about you?" She'd looked out at the water, her expression distant. "I'll be fine. You should come with me. Apply to schools. Get out of here. Because someone has to stay." He hadn't understood what she meant. Not then. And a week later, he'd left for college and never came back. He'd called her a few times in the beginning. They'd exchanged letters. But slowly, over months and then years, they drifted apart. Life got busy. He got busy. And eventually, he stopped writing. He told himself it was natural. People moved on. That's what happened. But standing here now, staring out at the water, Thomas felt the weight of that choice like a stone in his chest. He hadn't thought about Anna Delacroix in years. And now, for some reason, he couldn't stop. He didn't stay long. The cold was starting to seep through his jacket, and the quiet was beginning to feel too heavy. But he turned and walked back up the road toward the inn, his footsteps soft on the pavement. But as he reached the top of the hill, he saw something that made him stop. A light, not a street lamp, not a porch light, a lantern. The Albright house was a narrow 2-story cottage at the corner of Lakeshore and Elm, painted white with dark shutters. Miss Albright had lived there alone for as long as Thomas could remember. He'd been inside a few times, years ago, when she'd invited him over to talk about books or look at her collection of old poetry volumes. The house should have been empty now. So why was there a lantern on the steps? Thomas hesitated, then walked toward it. The lantern was old-fashioned, the kind that burned oil, with a glass chimney and a brass base. The flame inside flickered gently, casting soft, wavering shadows across the porch. Beside it was an envelope. His name was written on the front in elegant, slanted handwriting. Thomas Gray. His hand trembled slightly as he picked it up. The envelope was thick, made of expensive cream-colored paper. The flap was sealed with red wax, stamped with a small embossed A. His hand trembled slightly as he picked it up. The envelope was thick, made of expensive cream-colored paper. The flap was sealed with red wax, stamped with a small embossed A. He turned it over, his pulse quickening. There was no note, no explanation, just his name. He looked up at the dark windows of the house, half expecting to see someone watching. But there was nothing, just shadows and stillness. Thomas slipped the envelope into his jacket pocket, picked up the lantern, and turned to leave. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had just begun, something he didn't yet understand. Back in the blue room at the inn, Thomas sat on the edge of the bed with the lantern on the nightstand and the envelope in his hands. He stared at it for a long time. Part of him didn't want to open it. Part of him wanted to put it back, walk away, pretend he'd never found it. But he knew he couldn't. Slowly, carefully, he broke the wax seal and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in the same elegant handwriting. My dear Thomas, if you're reading this, then I've passed on, and you've come back to Willowshore. I wasn't sure you would, but I hoped. There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago, but didn't. I told myself it wasn't my place, that it wasn't my story to tell. But now, at the end of my life, I realized that silence can be just as harmful as words. 20 years ago, a young woman came to me and asked me to keep something safe. She said that one day, someone would come looking for it. She said that when that day came, I should give it to them, along with this letter. That young woman was Anna Delacroix, and the person she was waiting for, Thomas, was you. Thomas's breath caught. He read the line again. Anna Delacroix. His hands are shaking now. He kept reading, and I know that Anna stayed here in Willowshore. But what you don't know, what no one told you, is that Anna stayed because she was waiting. She loved you, Thomas. She never said it outright, but I saw it in her eyes every time your name came up. She loved you, Thomas, and I think, in your own way, you loved her too. But life has a way of pulling people apart, and sometimes we don't realize what we've lost until it's too late. Anna left Willowshore 5 years ago. No one knows where she went. She didn't tell anyone. She just disappeared one autumn morning, leaving behind only a few belongings and a letter for me. In that letter, she asked me to hold onto something for you. She said it would explain everything. I've kept my promise, Thomas. What she left for you is in the blue chest in my attic. The key is taped to the back of this letter. He hadn't thought about her in so long, hadn't let himself think about her. And now, suddenly, she was everywhere. He hadn't slept that night. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the key clutched in his hand. His mind racing. Why hadn't she told him? Why hadn't she reached out? Why had she just disappeared? The questions spun through his head like a storm. And by the time the first light of dawn crept through the window, he still had no answers. The funeral was at 10 o'clock. Thomas dressed in a dark suit and drove to the church, his mind still elsewhere. The service was small and quiet, attended mostly by older members of the community who'd known Miss Albright for decades. The pastor spoke about her kindness, her love of literature, her dedication to her students. Thomas barely heard any of it. The Albright house was unlocked. The lawyer had told him he was welcome to go inside, that the estate was still being settled, and he had permission to retrieve whatever Miss Albright had left for him. Thomas pushed open the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled like old books and lavender. The furniture was covered in white sheets, and the air was thick with dust and stillness. He moved through the hallway, past the sitting room and the kitchen, to the narrow staircase that led to the second floor. At the end of the upstairs hallway was a small door. The attic. The blue chest was in the corner beneath the window. Thomas knelt beside it, his heart pounding. He pulled the key from his pocket and fitted it into the lock. It turned smoothly. He lifted the lid. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon, a sketchbook, a small wooden box, and a photograph. Thomas picked up the photograph first. It was of him and Anna, taken the summer before he left. They were sitting on the dock at Ember Lake, their arms around each other, both of them grinning at the camera. The sun was setting behind them, painting the sky gold and pink. He remembered that day. He remembered everything about it. His throat tightened. He set the photograph aside and reached for the sketchbook. The pages were filled with drawings. Sketches of Willowshore, the lake, the trees, the old church. Dozens of them. All of him. Thomas stared at them, his chest aching. Others were stunningly detailed. He turned the pages slowly, barely breathing. And then, near the end of the sketchbook, he found a note written in the margin. I keep trying to draw you the way I remember you, but I think I'm starting to forget. He closed the sketchbook and set it down, his hands shaking. Next, he opened the small wooden box. Inside were more photographs, a pressed flower, a ticket stub from a movie they'd seen together, and a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it. It was a map of the United States, hand-drawn, with little stars marked in different cities. New York, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle. At the bottom, in Anna's handwriting, it said, "Places we said we'd go." Thomas closed his eyes. Finally, he reached for the bundle of letters. There were at least 30 of them, all addressed to him, all unopened. He stared at them, his heart breaking. She'd written to him, over and over again, and she'd never sent them. Slowly, carefully, he untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. Dear Thomas, it's been 3 months since you left. I keep telling myself I'll stop writing these letters, but I can't seem to help it. It's like if I keep writing, you're still here somehow. Willowshore feels different without you. Smaller, quieter. I'll walk past your house sometimes and forget you're not there. I hope college is everything you wanted. I hope you're happy. I miss you. Anna. He opened the next one. Dear Thomas, I saw your mom at the grocery store today. She said you're doing well. She said you're making friends, joining clubs, writing for the school paper. I am glad. I started painting again, mostly landscapes. The lake, mostly. I think I'm getting better. Or maybe I'm just getting older, and I've stopped caring if I'm good or not. I still think about that night on the dock. I wonder if you do too. He kept reading, letter after letter, year after year. She wrote about her life in Willowshore, about the people she saw, the things she did, the quiet, unchanging rhythms of the town. She wrote about her art, her doubts, her dreams. And she wrote about him, how much she missed him, how much she wished things had been different, how much she loved him. The last letter was dated 5 years ago. Dear Thomas, this will be the last letter I write to you. Not because I don't love you anymore. I think I'll always love you. But because I've finally realized that love isn't enough if it only lives in one person's heart. I stayed in Willowshore because I thought you'd come back. I thought that one day you'd realize you missed this place, missed me, and you'd come home. But you're not coming back, are you? And I can't keep waiting. I've spent 20 years of my life loving a memory, and I think it's time I let it go. I'm leaving Willowshore. I don't know where I'm going yet. Maybe nowhere. Maybe everywhere. Maybe all those places we used to talk about. I'm leaving this chest with Catherine. I trust her. And if you ever do come back, I want you to know the truth. I want you to know that you are loved. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, Thomas. I hope it makes you happy. Goodbye. Thomas sat on the attic floor, the letter in his hands, tears streaming down his face. He'd been so blind, so selfish. He'd left Willowshore and never looked back. Never considered what he'd left behind. Never thought about the people who'd loved him. And Anna had waited. For 20 years, she'd waited. And then she'd let go. He didn't know how long he sat there. Eventually, the light through the window began to fade, and the attic grew dim. Thomas carefully gathered the letters, the sketchbook, the photographs, and the wooden box, and placed them all back in the blue chest. He carried it downstairs, out to his car, and set it gently in the trunk. Then he stood there in the driveway, staring at the house, the weight of everything pressing down on him. He had to find her. He had to try. That night, back in the blue room at the inn, Thomas sat at the small desk by the window and opened his laptop. He started searching. Anna Delacroix. He tried social media first. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Nothing. No profiles. No photos. No trace. He tried searching her name with different cities, different states. Still nothing. Hours passed. And then, just after midnight, he found something. A small article in an arts and culture magazine from Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was about a local gallery hosting an exhibition of landscape paintings by emerging artists. And one of the featured artists was listed as A. Delacroix. The exhibition had ended 3 months ago, but there were photos of the work on display. And there, in the third image, was a painting of Ember Lake. It was unmistakable. The dock, the trees, the water reflecting the stars. He scrolled down and found a contact link for the gallery. He sent an email immediately, his fingers flying over the keys. Subject: looking for A. Delacroix. To whom it may concern, my name is Thomas Gray. I'm trying to get in touch with one of the artists who exhibited at your gallery earlier this year. A. Delacroix. It's very important. If you could pass along my contact information, or let me know how I might reach her, I would be incredibly grateful. He hit send and sat back, staring at the screen. Now all he could do was wait. Thomas had returned to Philadelphia by then, back to his apartment, his job, his routine. His mind was elsewhere. And then, on a Thursday evening, just as the sun was setting, his phone buzzed. A new email from an unfamiliar address. Subject: I don't know what to say. I wasn't sure I'd ever hear from you again. I don't know if I want to, but I also don't know if I can keep pretending you don't exist. I'm in Santa Fe. If you want to talk, you know where to find me. He didn't hesitate. Santa Fe was warm and dry, the air scented with sage and dust. He parked in a driveway and sat there for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel. And then he saw her. She was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching him. She looked different, older. Her dark curly hair was shorter now, streaked with a few strands of silver. But her eyes were the same. Thomas got out of the car and walked toward her, his heart in his throat. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Hi. I'm sorry. Anna's expression flickered. For a moment, he thought she might turn and walk away. But then she nodded. Come inside. They sat at her kitchen table, mugs of tea cooling between them, and they talked. They talked for hours. About the letters, about the years, about the choices they'd made and the things they'd lost. Thomas told her about his life in Philadelphia, his job, his hollow relationship, the way he'd built a life that looked successful from the outside but felt empty inside. Anna told him about leaving Willowshore, about traveling, about finding herself in the process, about finally pursuing her art Not because she thought it would make her famous, but because it was the only thing that made her feel alive. I'm not angry anymore. You should be. She shook her head. Anger doesn't change anything, she said. You left because you needed to, and I stayed because I needed to. We were kids, Thomas. We didn't know what we were doing. But you waited for 20 years. I did, and that's okay too. Is it? He asked. She looked at him, her eyes soft and sad. It has to be. They didn't fix everything that day. 20 years was a long time, and there were wounds that needed more than a single conversation to heal. But it was a start. Thomas stayed in Santa Fe for a week. He and Anna spent their days walking through the hills, visiting galleries, sitting on her porch, and watching the sun set over the desert. And slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild something. Not the relationship they'd had before. Something new, something quieter, something real. On his last night in Santa Fe, they drove out to a place Anna called her lake, a small, still pond surrounded by cottonwood trees, hidden in a fold of the hills. They sat on the shore, their feet in the cool water, and watched the stars come out. I'm glad you found me, Anna said softly. I'm glad you let me. Thomas said, so what happens now? I don't know, he said honestly, but I'd like to find out. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face, and then she nodded. Okay. Thomas flew back to Philadelphia the next day. But this time, he didn't leave with the intention of never coming back. He and Anna kept in touch. They emailed, they called, and a few months later, he flew out to see her again. And then again, and again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, Thomas felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. A year later, Thomas left Philadelphia for good. He moved to Santa Fe, found a small apartment downtown, and started writing again. Not the dry, impersonal articles he'd been churning out for years, but stories. Not the dry, impersonal articles he'd been churning out for years, but stories. Stories about people and places and second chances. He and Anna didn't rush into anything. They took their time, learning each other all over again, building something steady and strong. And on a warm evening in late September, exactly 2 years after he'd found the blue chest in Miss Albright's attic, Thomas took Anna back to Willowshore. They stood together on the dock at Ember Lake, the water still and silver beneath the stars, and he told her the truth he should have told her 20 years ago. I love you, he said. Anna smiled, her eyes bright with tears. I love you too, she said. And this time neither of them let go. Years later, when people asked Thomas how he and Anna found their way back to each other, he always told them the same thing. I came back for a funeral, but what I found was a second chance. And every year on the anniversary of the day, he'd found the blue chest, he and Anna would light a lantern and set on the steps of the old Albright house. A small thank you to the woman who'd kept a promise. A small light in the dark. A reminder that it's never too late to come home. And that's where we'll leave Thomas and Anna tonight, standing by the water, beneath the stars, holding on to the second chance they almost missed. Thank you for spending this evening with me here at Lantern Lake Stories. If this story brought you a little peace, a little comfort, or just a quiet place to rest your mind, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe and join me for the next story by Lantern Light. And wherever you are in the world tonight, whatever weight you're carrying, I hope you sleep deeply, dream kindly, and wake tomorrow with a heart a little lighter than it was today. Good night.